Dr. Ruth Gotian, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here. You're the author of the relatively recent book, The Success Factor: Developing the Mindset and the Skill Set for Peak Business Performance. You had me at peak business performance. It's great to have you here.
So good to be here and greetings from New York City.
All right, all right. And greetings back from somewhere in the woods of Wisconsin here. All right, so I'd love to lead off with first. I love the book, the coaching
Oh, thank you.
questions, the takeaways, the stories, which I suspect you get a lot of great feedback on that. So thank you for creating this wonderful work for all of us and rolling up your wisdom and your research. That's tremendous, and I'm excited to dive into it a little bit with you.
I'm excited to geek out and find other people who geek out about what I geek out about.
I love it. I love it too. Absolutely. All right. So I have to lead off with your mentor's comment. You mentioned that a couple of times in the book. It seems to have inspired a lot in your life. And if I'm reading this correctly, your mentor offered do something important, not just interesting. Why is the study of success important to you?
Yeah, those are six words that changed my life. Those were words by Dr. Bert Shapiro.
Hmm.
Do something important, not just interesting. And it's interesting, Dr. Fauci said the same thing to me. If it's interesting to you. And that's nice. But
Hmm.
that might be a hobby. But if your goal is to have an impact, if you want to leave this world better than you found it, it can't just be your hobby. It's got to have ripple effects, and that's where doing something important is so critical. And when he said those words to me, I was 43 when I went back to school to get my doctorate.
Hmm.
That changed the entire study for my dissertation from a one institutional study to a national study. And now my work on high achievers is an international study. It's global. So six words can
Is
change
it
your life.
amazing how serendipitous it was to hear those words and then to have them kind of motivate, inspire, help you find that intrinsic sense of purpose that you talk about
That's right.
in the book. So, all right. So, if I were to gently put you on the spot and say, how would you define your purpose? What would it be?
I actually wrote it down.
Cool.
I wrote it
You're the
down
first person
because,
ever that I've asked that question who had the written version at the.
and you know what? I have to find it though. But
Okay.
the reason I wrote it down is because it's it can change over time, but
Absolutely.
my bottom line has always been the same.
Hmm.
I help high achievers develop and manage their success.
Ooh, I love that. Love the focus on the high achievers, very consistent with you.
Well, I think we don't put enough emphasis on high achievers, right? So if you think about the workforce, right, we all have these annual performance appraisals every year, right? And we're rated on some sort of scale.
Hmm.
And if you are let's say it's a scale of 1 to 5 and you are ranked a 3, you're average. Great. You're meeting expectations. Keep up the great work. We'll see you next year. If you're a 4, a high potential, or a 5, a high
Right.
achiever, yeah, you might get a little money thrown your way, but it's a pat in the back. Thank you. See you next year. If you fall below average, that's when everything starts to happen.
Hmm.
You are given a corrective action plan. You are sent to courses and workshops to improve your skills. You have a supervisor who checks in with you to make sure you're able to meet those skills. We're doing all that for people who are not meeting expectations. What if we put that same level of effort and resources into people who are excelling? Imagine how much more they can
Oh, I
excel, how
love
much
that.
more innovative they can be, how much more curious they can be. I mean, if you ask a high achiever and say, what is the gap in your knowledge? What do you want to learn more? We'll pay for you to go to a course. They would jump at it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
It's a great retention tool. Who do you think their friends are? Other high achievers.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
They'll
much
recruit.
research too on the power of frankly hanging out with other people who are motivated like you, like kind
That's right.
motivated. So yeah, I love that. I mean, the whole performance evaluation system, kind of a separate top sidebar topic. drives the tyranny of mediocrity. And frankly, I channel my inner Deming as it relates to his evaluation of performance systems, and it's still a problem in our world today. I'm going to come back to why we don't have more high achievers or invest more in high achievers in the workspace. So hold that thought a little bit. But one of the things I seized upon was this statement you made in the book early on. Success could be learned, and equally as important, it could be taught. I reverse engineered a high achiever's method to success and created a blueprint for others to follow. That's a bold claim, Ruth.
I stand by it.
All right. You have cracked the code on something that so many of us have been looking for. How did that unfold for you? Tell us a little bit about the journey.
I have been fascinated with high achievers my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back to school, I studied physician scientists. These are people who get their MD and also are doing research. They have this dual lens, this dual life that they're living. And that started and propelled me to study people who won the biggest scientific awards, the Nobel Prize, et cetera, et cetera. After I finished my doctorate and I came up with these 4 elements of success I found with this population, I said, I wonder if the same would hold true for other extreme high achievers. And that's when I started interviewing the Olympians and NBA champions and CEOs and astronauts and senior political figures. And that is when it hit me. It's the same 4 things. So if you went to space or if you do backflips on the ice, it's the same 4 elements of success. And if I could do that, I could figure that out. And my background's in adult learning and leadership, so I know how to teach this. I can then spell it out and teach it to people. And not only that, I can motivate them to take that first step, because that first step is the hardest step. And that's what I did. It's got to be
like looking at the Grand Canyon and stepping off into that. Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
I love that first step emphasis. And I think you will do that and a great deal more for them.
Yeah,
what a cool story. So I love extracting words from the text, so from the narrative in there. So one of the comments was, growing up, I never thought of myself as a high achiever. And you also offer, I suspect many fall into this category. So first of all, why didn't you view yourself as a high achiever? I've looked at your biography and your accolades and your achievements. You're a high achiever, Ruth.
I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of extreme high achievers, and none of them think they're high achievers. And I'll tell you a very funny story.
Interesting.
When the book came out, we were in the middle of Omicron, right? It's middle COVID, Omicron, right? And obviously did not have an in-person book launch party. I had one on Zoom, and I had one specifically for the people who are in the book, right? Because I knew all of them, but they didn't know each other. So right before the book launch, right before the event, one of the astronauts texts me and he said, I'm really looking forward. I can't wait to see you on Zoom in an hour. Will Dr. Fauci be there? Because Dr. Fauci's one of the people who I interviewed for the book. And I said, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I think he's a little busy right now, right? I don't think he's going to make it. I said, but this Nobel Prize winner will be there. And I told him who it was. And the astronaut said to me, ooh, Nobel Prize winner. Now that's a high achiever.
The astronaut says that.
You went to space in a tin can. If you're not a high achiever, what does that say about the rest of us? Now, I told this story later on to the Nobel Prize winner, and he said, well, this is really fascinating. He said, I know a ton of Nobel Prize winners. We get together, we have events, we all know each other, some of us work together, but I don't know of a single astronaut, and I think they are high achievers. Well, I can fix that. So I introduced the 2 of them. But what that led me to believe and to understand is that, as you said earlier, the people you surround yourself with, that becomes your average.
Yes.
That becomes what everyone does. That is no longer something to seek out. So if everyone around you is an astronaut, it's no big deal. If you want to do more, you have to do something above that. If you're a Nobel Prize winner and everyone's a Nobel Prize winner, it's not a big deal, right? Yeah. So that's why you need to meet people who are different from you, who are doing different things, who
I
can
love that.
teach you
I love
something
that.
new.
Yeah. And you have a nice section in the book on how to build that network and the emphasis on doing that. I have to share my own little story. I'm still geeking out about this. So, a little over a month ago, I had a chance to do this same type of interview with Kim KC Campbell. By the way, the KC stands for Killer Chick. And she's one of the highest decorated fighter pilots in the US Air Force. She is the personification of your high achiever, someone who was turned down to get into the US Air Force Academy, continued to apply to improve herself and worked her way in, ultimately graduated #1 in her class, won all sorts of awards, led leadership development at the US Air Force Academy, survived practically being shot down over enemy territory in the Middle East. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the fact that I had a chance to talk with her, the fact that I have a chance to talk with you and so many others, this is my little attempt to engage with individuals that are doing remarkable things in all different walks of life.
That's you geeking out.
It is absolutely the geek out. So,
Now, you know what's interesting about your story is that it reminds me of this one of the stories that I share in the book, The Success Factor of Dr. Peggy Whitson.
mhm,
Dr. Peggy Whitson is a biochemist. She was working at NASA. Not everyone who works at NASA is an astronaut. And she was doing all the experiments. And when they decided to allow women to become astronauts, she applied
mhm.
and was rejected, and applied again and was rejected. And this cycle kept going on and on and on for a decade. But she never gave up.
Mhm.
She kept applying, and she kept using the skills and the nuances she learned about the culture by working at NASA. She used that to strengthen her application. Well, ultimately, Dr. Peggy Whitson was accepted as an astronaut. She went on to become the first female commander of the International Space Station, which is a role she held twice.
Right.
She spent more days in space than any American astronaut of any gender. And this astronaut, who was rejected for a decade, went on to become NASA's chief astronaut, in charge
Wow.
of all the
What a
astronauts.
story, and what a wonderful example of the perseverance that you highlight in the book that's so critical. By the way, I have a very technical synonym for perseverance. It's called
Yes,
stick-to-itiveness.
stick-to-itiveness.
Stick-to-itiveness. Yeah, yeah. I tend to be someone who has a lot of stick-to-itiveness because most of my things don't work out initially. And by the way, we often don't know how we inspire people. Your book and that section on it has inspired me to rethink a book manuscript that I've had rejected 3 times. So thank you, because you kind of clubbed me over the head without even knowing it. So I appreciate that.
I am so happy to hear that. And it's not about how many times it's rejected, it's about that one time that it's accepted.
So that just, I know I'm jumping around, but it's what I'm apt to do. The Apollo Ono story on his first attempt at a medal.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. I mean, maybe many have heard that. I actually had never heard that one before, and I'm a huge fan of him. He fell, right?
Yeah, so for those who don't know Apollo Ono, he's the most decorated Winter Olympian with 8 medals.
Right.
He also won the Mirabal Trophy on Dancing with the Stars, which is how some other people know him.
Good point.
But if you watch the Winter Olympics, he was the one with the big bandana
Hmm.
doing short track speed skating. And, we're recording this on 9/11, which
Mm,
was a horrific day in the world's history.
right.
And for those of us in New York City, we won't forget any detail of even the smell of that day.
Mm,
And a few months after that was the Winter Olympics, and Apollo Ono was in a race,
hmm.
and 100 meters before the finish line, he was knocked down. And he got up and crawled his way to the finish line. It caused a lot of people, this whole train reaction, a lot of people to fall, and he got the silver.
Wow.
And usually there's a lot of research that people who get the silver medal are usually very upset.
Hmm.
The bronze medalists are happier than the silver medalists, because the silver medalists feel that they lost the gold, where the bronze medalists feel that they won a medal. But he was so excited. He said, this was just the situation the United States was in at that time.
Hmm.
We were coming from a horrific loss. We were scrappy. We were just getting together. We were doing whatever we needed to do to get to that finish line. And when I asked him, of the 8 medals that you have, which is your favorite, he actually pointed to that first silver medal.
Wow.
And that to me was remarkable.
And I don't know if it was your words or his words at the time, but he didn't lose the gold. He won the silver, I think was how it was
Exactly.
described. Just, yeah, incredible.
Yeah, which is the
The book is just filled
opposite.
with so many stories. Yeah, so many stories like that. All right, so back to that point where so many people may not view themselves as high achievers. That could be kind of a mindset. How
Mm.
do we shift? How do we begin to shift that mindset in ourselves?
Well, I don't think the labels are important,
Hmm.
right? I think if you have a label of a high achiever, you might say, I don't need to work anymore. You're
Hmm.
going to start resting on your laurels. So maybe it's better that you don't give yourself that label.
Okay, I like that.
But recognize if you're achieving things that most other people can't
Hmm.
or won't,
Hmm.
you're in a different class. And as long as you are willing to put in the work and put in that curiosity, then you're going to outwork and outachieve and outwin people time and time again. So
Well,
don't worry about the
you mean I
labels.
have to work? I thought that we weren't we going to get like a listicle of 10 things we could do that would magically make us high achievers that didn't require too much work?
Look, you could be an
Uh,
Olympic level athlete,
uh,
right? But if you're sitting on the couch all day, you're not going to make the NBA or the Olympics. Doesn't work that way.
regardless of those dreams and fantasies, right?
That's right. That's right.
So the comment here, high achievers have found something that they're really good at, have invested their energy into studying it and perfecting it to the
That's
best
right.
of their ability. I run into a lot of people that don't really feel like they're good at anything or don't know what it is that they're good at. How do we start to uncover this?
So I think you have to have a mix of what you're good at and what you love doing.
Hmm.
And that's just this perfect blend, right? It's you want to work harder because you know that it's towards something that you're going to get better.
Hmm.
So in the book, I take people through a 3-column exercise called the passion audit.
Audit. Yes, love that.
Yes, which differentiates between what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you love to do, what you would, give to somebody else if you could, and what you would do for free if you could. And if we can find that right mix for you, there's actually research that shows that you only need to spend 20% of your work
Right.
time
Hmm.
working on the things you love in order to reduce burnout. So, what if we can find that thing for you? Now, if the listeners can't wait until they get the book, The Success Factor, they can just hop on my website and actually download the passion audit.
Oh,
All they have
nice.
to do is go to
And
ruthgotian.com
I'll share that as
slash
well.
passion audit. Yep.
Okay, great, fantastic. So the passion and the purpose, sense of purpose, to me, they kind of go together. Am I conflating those terms, or do you agree with that?
No, no, it goes together.
Hmm.
Can't have one without the other.
I have to share an anecdote. You had the words of your mentor that changed your life. I had been off on my own for a number of years, and a client lured me back into working. And we had a wonderful success, and the company became a market leader, and we were wildly financially successful, and the people were good, and I hated it because
Mm,
I was no longer passionate. It was no longer my purpose. So this is out in Seattle. The CEO walks up to me one morning. It's a gray, wet Seattle morning. I had not yet had that first cup of coffee. He says, "Hey, you've got your purpose all wrong." It's like, "All right, Dale, I'm pretty self-aware. Hit me with it." He goes, "You think you think your purpose is about building market leaders and driving strategy, and you're good at those things, but your purpose is about helping people do things they never thought possible in their careers." And I just stopped in my tracks. I had never thought about my sense of purpose. So at the age of, say, 47, that was my awakening to, you know what? This is my driver. Everything that I do, this interview is about helping people find ways to tap into themselves and achieve the possible. And so it's powerful. Purpose is powerful.
you found your way to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, I'm grateful to Dale to this day. So one of the areas too I loved, and I'm a fan of it. I'm a big fan of preparation. I'm a chronic over preparer. And you talk in the section about how high achievers still do the same things, the same fundamental drills and tasks that they've been doing earlier in their careers, albeit maybe with slightly better equipment or resources, but they
That's right.
still do those. Why is that so important? Why are the fundamentals so important?
You can't rest on your laurels, and you have to know how to do the basics. And every high achiever I've spoken to, when things got really tough, they always went back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an athlete or if you're a scientist, you always go back to the basics because that's a foundation. It's like having a house without a foundation. You can't. And those early basic techniques are your foundation.
So critical. So, sidebar, you will be featured in my upcoming manager development program as I work with a cohort of just new managers, and we're focused on building that foundation. And I'm going to draw that perspective into the course. So thank you again.
Love it.
Attribution and recommendation of the book. I have to ask, what are the downsides to being a high achiever? What do you think about that? What are the downsides?
There are some.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's the obvious that you have control over your time, but you don't, because there's always more that you want to do, and there's not enough. 24 hours a day is not enough, and the high achievers are very good at getting the balance between the sleep, the rest, right, the work. But I think the part that's not discussed, which has become a topic of conversation with many of the high achievers I've been speaking with of late, people don't get you. They don't understand. They don't understand your fascination with the topic. It doesn't exactly make for riveting dinner time conversation. And people don't understand why you are willing to put in this level of work for something they don't understand. But other high achievers, they get it. They totally get it. And they can relate. So I think that more than the time management, more than all of those other things, I think that is the hardest piece for high achievers.
Yeah, I'm just processing on that, thinking about clients or friends who I would view as high achievers, and they've faced that level of misunderstanding, in some cases from family.
Yeah.
Parents, spouses, and others. So
usually
I think it is a significant issue for sure. All right. One of my favorite phrases in the entire book is the valence of Velcro versus Teflon. I love that. I wish I would have coined it. Kudos to you.
Well, I didn't coin it. It's actually a group relations vernacular that's used in the study of group relations. And this is how you take feedback and how you take nuances. So for example, if you are like Velcro, and I, by the way, used to be the queen of Velcro, which means every negative comment, every rolling of the eyes, sucking of the teeth, not the lack of response to your text or email, that would put you down. That would stick to you. And you would focus on the one negative instead of all of the positive. And the problem is that when you have all of these things sticking to you, after a while, it starts to weigh you down. And working your way back up is really, really hard. Now, on the flip side, if you had a valence of Velcro, then every negative comment and every roll of the eyes and every ignored text would just roll off of you like Teflon.
Yeah, I think you meant the valence of Teflon in this case, right?
A valence of Teflon, I
yeah,
mean.
right.
Valence
right,
of Teflon.
Right. Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is I told you I was the queen of Velcro, right?
Yeah. How'd you get beyond that?
I went to a conference. It was actually a group relations conference. And I said, I am going to try being like Teflon. And I did it for 1 weekend, one conference. It was the most liberating experience I have ever had in my entire life. Because at every conference there's something that pisses you off. I was not going to be pissed off, but I wasn't going to care. I have not looked back since then.
Wow.
I have been predominantly Teflon since then.
That's fantastic. It's hard to do too. You read I actually looked at your book reviews. They're all positive. So that's the good. No worrying about that Teflon out there.
Well, there's always one,
Yeah, there's always one in a crowd.
But that shows you that real humans read it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I have this question, and maybe we'll kind of think about this, talk about it. If we can solve this problem, we'll write the next book together. So You cite the research that says high achievers are 400% more productive than the average employee. I think you mentioned that earlier there.
Yeah.
And of course, every organization has to work to hire and retain and develop
Yeah.
these individuals. Yet we have the numbers from organizations like Gallup, and even if they're half accurate, we have an engagement crisis.
Oh, yeah, we do.
We've had so many different issues there. Why do we as leaders and managers in general struggle to develop the high performers, to find and develop those high performers? Why do we have the turnover we have and the disengagement and so forth? We need to solve this problem. I think it's a crisis.
I think it's, how we started the conversation. I think our emphasis is on the wrong group of people.
Mm.
I think we put all of our emphasis and all of our resource on the people who maybe don't want to be there or can't be there. Right now, of course, there are those that definitely could use some retooling and could be exceptional.
Sure.
But we all know that a lot of organizations, that's not the case. But there are people who are truly exceptional. And if we gave them even a fraction of those resources and that the time and that push to be innovative and curious to your heart's delight, can you just imagine how far they would go and how they would recruit their friends to come join? Because this is the place where you get to be curious and innovative, right? And they'll send you to courses if you want to learn something new. That's what you want to be around.
For every organizational leader watching this and listening to this, pause it, write that down, and think hard about it. It's just such a critical issue. And you tell me, you know the research much better than I do. Isn't there some research that suggests if everybody on your team is a high performer, you could end up with a whole new set of challenges?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I would actually add another layer to that.
Okay.
Everyone has different skills and things that they're really good at. So I am really good at executing, right? We come up with a plan and somebody's has to execute it. Some people are really great at coming up with the plan, but don't ever have them executed because it'll never happen, right? Some people are great at seeing potential problems or prototyping or coming up with solutions.
Sure.
It is critical that your team include all of these different kinds of people. If you only have executors on your team, what are you executing, right?
Yeah, or if you only have idea generators, you're going to end up in a great debating society over wonderful ideas that will go nowhere.
Exactly, which is why you need the diversity that we often talk about is also diversity of thought. And diversity of thought also includes these different skill sets, right? You want someone who's going to foresee problems. You want somebody that can come up with solutions. You want somebody who's able to strategize, and you want somebody who's able to execute.
So back to this perseverance, the stick-to-itiveness topic, as I reference it. What are some of the common themes you heard from people? Because we all know life has an interesting habit of getting in the way, life and circumstances.
Yeah.
What are the common themes about how people were able to stick to it or to persevere?
Yeah. And look, I always say it's persevere or grittiness or resilience or whatever you want to call it. But there was one thing in particular that really stood out to me. And that was the way these high achievers viewed challenges. They never questioned if they would overcome it. They knew that they would, right? Every Olympian I have spoken to said, I'm going to get the medal. That was never the question. The question was how? What is the strategy I haven't thought of yet? Now that puts them in the driver's seat. It's no longer someone else making that decision. And they are willing to put in the work, right? They all say, I'm not afraid of hard work. They are willing to do that. So what is the strategy I haven't thought of yet? Once you're able to do that, you can start thinking about all the possible things you can do in order to help you achieve your goal. And look, if you think about it, the Olympics were deferred for a year because of the pandemic.
Sure.
I don't know of a single Olympian who dropped out. And they couldn't go to the gym, and they couldn't meet with the trainer, and they couldn't meet with the nutritionist, and they couldn't get all the things that they needed to get. And they found other ways to train for the biggest arena of their life, right? They went to the park, they did it on Zoom, they figured it out.
I mean, that may be one of the most powerful takeaways in a book filled with powerful takeaways for us is what is the strategy we haven't thought of yet? because there are so many blockers. And again, where you inspired me was I'm going to find another way to bring that book to life, some form or fashion or another, because the way I was going at it didn't work. So love it, love it. How should people use this book? Is it a cover to cover read before we get at it, or what do you recommend?
I'll tell you what people are telling me.
Mm-hmm.
They read it cover to cover. And I love, 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 love when people send me or tag me on pictures where the book is highlighted or all tabbed out
Post-its all over. Yeah,
yes, I
yeah.
love it. And I've noticed a ton of that.
Mm-hmm.
They tell me that they do a read once through,
Mm-hmm.
and then they keep it by their nightstand and they refer to different sections of it based on
Mm-hmm.
what they need at that time.
Ooh,
Now,
love
that's
that.
what's interesting because I actually wrote that in the introduction. I said, this is a book you can leave on your nightstand and refer
Mhm.
to it over and over again based on what you need because our needs change over time.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's how people are using it. And I love that because it's not something that you read once and then put it on your shelf. This is actually a resource book that you can use over and over again. And you mentioned earlier that there are coaching questions at the
Hmm.
end. As an
Yes.
executive coach, I want you to reflect and I ask you questions to prompt that reflection, to get you thinking, because I want you to take that first step. That's
Yeah,
the hardest step.
I loved the coaching questions, Ruth. They were good. They weren't overwhelming. I tend to create long lists of questions. You kind of nailed the key questions based on the content in the chapter very quickly. My gentle nudge to everybody out there who's working through those questions is grab your journal, whether it's digital or analog, don't care, and answer the questions. Think through them. Spend some time with those at the end of each chapter as you're working through it. I think people will benefit from that level of reflection.
Yeah. And I want to build on that.
Hmm.
If I'm an author, I love writing, but I'm also an extrovert. So reflecting on command is not easy for me.
Hmm.
My reflections come 2 days later. And it's usually when I'm driving. Use the voice memo on your phone.
Absolutely. Yep. Great tool. Priceless. Fantastic guidance. All right. So I have to ask, just about every author I've ever spoken with has learned something about themselves, not just their subject matter, but about themselves in the writing of a book. So what did you learn about yourself as you put together this great work?
Um, so this is fascinating because I never saw myself writing this book
Hmm.
ever.
Interesting.
My previous book was a textbook on
Hmm.
medical education. I was very comfortable doing academic work. Um, but years ago, I interviewed the former Surgeon General of the United States, Dr.
Hmm.
David Satcher. And I had a meeting with him one day, years later, and I said, "Oh, here's where my research is going, and just to keep him up to date." And he said, "You have to write a book about this."
Hmm.
And I said, who would be interested? Like, I geek out on it, but who would be
Right.
interested in this, right? He said, "I'm the Surgeon General. This is my warning. Trust me, people will like it."
Hmm.
And it took me several years before I actually wrote the book since he
Hmm.
said those words to me. And, I should have heeded the Surgeon General's warning because he was right. So it's listen to people who are different from you. And when they say something, even if you think it's crazy, don't discount it. Don't discount it
Process on it.
because there
Think
might be
about it.
something there. And it builds on my grandmother, my grandma Esther, blessed memory. When I was a kid, she said, "Ruthie, you're a beautiful writer."
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh, all I wrote were book reports." And it was always constrained writing. I was always answering somebody else's prompt. So I never saw myself as a writer, as an author, because I don't want to answer other people's questions. I didn't realize how liberating it is to write about what you want to write. So I did that passion audit on myself
Nice.
more than
Nice.
once.
Uh,
And that's when I realized I have to write this.
so I have to ask, is there going to be a follow-on of sorts?
There's actually another book coming out in the spring.
Hmm. Can you share
With
anything about it?
I sure can. I'm writing it with my UK-based co-author Andy Lopata, and
Hmm.
it's the Financial Times Guide to Mentoring.
Oh, nice.
And the research shows that those who are mentored out earn and outperform those who are not.
Mhm.
Every high achiever whom I've interviewed has a team of mentors around them. So we deconstructed and reconstructed mentoring, and the financial times that we want you to write it. So we're writing it, and it's coming out this spring.
That's incredible. And I have high expectations that that book will be well received. What a fabulous topic. And I think it's
Thank
a great
you.
time for that topic. And I hope you throw in there somewhere. By the way, everybody who's had a mentor that's positively affected, if they're still with you, go back and thank them. Please go back and
Yes.
thank them. It's priceless.
Yes. We actually put it in the book.
Mhm.
We want you to write a letter to them.
I love that.
I love, love, love when mentees of mine from 20 years ago, in fact, I share the story in the new book of a mentee from probably 20 years ago who just reached out to me out of the blue, and it was no big deal. I had people
Mhm.
reaching out to me. But I didn't know that the guidance I gave her on that phone call changed her life. I
You
had
just never
no
know.
idea until 20 years later when I randomly met up with her and she told me how it impacted her. And
I wrote an article a few years ago that was in the same vein of find that mentor, that teacher, that someone in your life that actually helped change the trajectory of it and thank them. And then I practiced what I preached and I reached back to the one teacher, my high school speech communication teacher who got me involved in debate and argumentation and everything about communicating changed my life for the better. And he had just retired. And so I couldn't find him. And I wrote the article. I actually put his name in the article. And about 3 years later, I get an email and it's him in the from. He found the article and he wrote me a note and we were able to connect that way. And it was a perfect tie-in.
I got
So yeah,
chills. Oh,
I
I
do just
love
thinking about
that.
it.
I have never heard of a teacher or a mentor who did not love getting those
Yeah,
notes.
I agree. So, Ruth, this was really incredible. I love the book, The Success Factor. I'll be sharing the links with it in the post. You've been incredible here. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today, for sharing your wisdom and insights with the world, and very excited not only about this book, but about the next one on mentoring as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Art.